Trump has given the Iranians 10 days. Now, we know from prior experience with Donald Trump that when he sets a deadline to avert military action, what normally happens is that he then catches everyone by surprise and he goes much earlier. So I think everybody is probably going to be very nervous this weekend to see what the Americans are doing. They've built up a huge military presence around the Iranians in recent weeks. There's now 2 aircraft carriers in the region. There's a huge number of military assets. And what that actually means in practice is that he does go ahead with military action. You're probably looking at, it's not going to be a kind of overnight thing like we saw with the B-2 bomber raids.
No, indeed.
It's going to be a sustained...
Be a proper war, mate, that will. Yes.
Quite. It will be a sustained military action, and that will have very significant consequences for everybody.
Another mess which has exploded before the government is the Chagos Islands, and we have 4 Chagosians sitting on the Chagos Islands being threatened with 3 years in prison for being on an island which was supposed to be returned to them. It's remarkable, isn't it?
It's an extraordinary week again. I think you and I must have discussed the Chagos Islands, Rod, at least 5 or 6 times in recent months. It's just it's this kind of topsy-turvy story about, yes, we are going ahead with ceding sovereignty to the Mauritians. No, we're not, and it's all predicated on one man, which is the US president, because he's now again revoked his support for the deal. So we're just all waiting now, Rod, to see what happens. It looks pretty impossible for the deal to go ahead if the US administration is not consenting to the deal. There are some people who think the actual treaty itself prohibits the treaty from being signed with Mauritius and going ahead if the Americans aren't signed up to it. But it's just the very prospect, given that, as some of your earlier guests were saying, I think Matthew Paris, given that Diego Garcia, the vital military base, is largely run by the Americans, it's very difficult in which our closest ally, if they're opposing it, we're going to press ahead. What we can clearly see is the UK government is making a last-ditch attempt again to try and get Trump to change his mind. And he's already done so twice now, so I wouldn't rule it out again. But, we had Yvette Cooper, the Foreign Secretary, visiting Washington at the end of this week, speaking to Marco Rubio, the US Secretary of State. And we know the State Department had, only a day before Trump expressed his disapproval, they'd actually said that the US government did approve the deal. So who knows what's going on in Washington as the UK tries to get this back on track.
Well, we'll stay with what longer because... he seemed to... Donald Trump didn't take the US Supreme Court decision on tariffs terribly well. He's described them all as traitors and ghastly people, awful and so on. So this is all about tariffs and tariffs which could apply to the UK. Has there been much reaction at all?
Yeah, well, I think the UK government is, like the rest of the world now, scrambling to understand the position and what it means for their exports and their businesses. Because what's happened, Rod, as you say, is the Supreme Court has determined that those tariffs, those Liberation Day tariffs that Trump imposed last year, he did not have the authority to impose them for using emergency power laws. So now what's happened is the UK had... When Trump imposed all those tariffs, we'd actually managed to get some carve-outs, and we were given a baseline tariff of 10%. And that was because we had something known as privileged trading position because of our close alliance with the Americans. But now everybody is back to square one, and we're no better off than anybody else because Trump has come out following that ruling by the Supreme Court and said, right, well, I'm just going to impose another set of global tariffs, and they're all going to be set at 10%, which means we no longer have any advantage. So the UK is trying to understand what's going on. Trump only has 150 days now. He's had to use different legislation now to impose these new tariffs, whilst he tries to. And then he's also said that he's looking at whether he can go further and do investigations into trade imbalances and then impose further higher tariffs on maybe other countries. I don't think that will affect us. So to be honest, the UK is pretty much in the same place it was before the Supreme Court ruling. It's still got the same tariff baseline, but it's just yet again such an extraordinary story, and it just shows to us and to everyone the power that America has over the global economy, because it's moving markets, this ruling, and clearly every government is now preoccupied by what comes next.
And we're not keen on the Americans bombing Iran by the look of things, are we?
Well, that is certainly, reading what the Foreign Secretary said in Washington yesterday, Yvette Cooper, that certainly seems to be the position. She was asked about, there's a story that's doing the rounds, Rod, that you may have seen, that apparently one of the reasons why Trump came out against the Chagos deal was because the UK was reportedly unwilling to let the Americans use one of our air bases to conduct potential strikes on Iran. And so that's the position seems to be the UK wants the Americans to keep negotiating, because right now the US and Iran are locked in negotiations. It's all about Iran's nuclear weapons development program, and the Americans want Iran to totally dismantle all of that. Trump has given the Iranians 10 days. Now, we know from prior experience with Donald Trump that when he sets a deadline to avert military action, what normally happens is that he then catches everyone by surprise and he goes much earlier. So I think everybody is probably going to be very nervous this weekend to see what the Americans are doing. They've built up a huge military presence around the Iranians in recent weeks. There's now 2 aircraft carriers in the region. There's a huge number of military assets. And what that actually means in practice is that he does go ahead with military action, you're probably looking at, it's not going to be a kind of overnight thing like we saw with the B-2 bomber raids.
No, indeed.
It's going to be a sustained...
Be a proper war, mate, that will. Yes.
Quite. It will be a sustained military action, and that will have very significant consequences for everybody.
It will. And just quickly, Harry, Gorton and Denton coming up. What's the mood like in the Labour camp?
Sorry, did you say local elections or Gorton?
No, Gorton and Denton.
Yes. So, look, the mood in the Labour camp is they think it's still all to play for. They're insistent that they can still win. I'm not sure that's the case. I mean, all the parties are saying it's too close to call. That reforming, the Greens want to portray it as a 2-horse race. Labour wants to portray it as a 2-horse race with reform. It's likely to be a very low voter turnout, and I think if I was to make a bet, it's probably going to go to reform.
Right, thanks for that. And my guess is either Labour or Green, but there we are. We'll have a fiver on it, mate. So, Harry Yorke there, that's the Sunday Times Deputy Political Editor, Harry Yorke. And he's in the paper tomorrow. You can read more there or with a digital subscription at thetimes.com. And good luck in your new job, mate.